I started going to Pinewoods, and I experienced the squares of Larry Edelman, this would be in the 80s, and Kathy Anderson, and I loved them. I loved the patterns, I loved the complexity. Also, of course, Tony Parks was another mentor in that, or another role model, because his timing and his voice, Tony Parks' voice, so beautiful, just made you want to dance. But experiencing Larry Edelman's 1950s and 1960s squares, I was like, what is this? I love this. And I was really scared to call squares. There was something so live about calling them. It wasn't just this one pattern. And I have Debbie Gray to thank, because she asked me to call with the debutantes at NEFA. So this was a trio or a duo standing behind Debbie with singing square, singing harmony. And I was going to have the guest spot. I was petrified. I love to sing. And Debbie said, but all squares are just singing. That did it for me. So I did two very simple squares, the Chic of Araby and something else. Loved it. And then realized, made the jump, started calling New England style squares. Got it immediately. And then took a few workshops at Pinewoods with Larry to understand, first of all, old-time music, which is very different from New England music, which I did, and I loved it, loved the music. And then I started calling them, got into them, and then I realized that's my next frontier. I'm feeling very comfortable with contra. And Bob Dulcimer came to Pinewoods, and he did a 1-hour-a-day session on modern Western. And he warned us. He said, you've got to come at the beginning, can't come in the middle. And he taught us the simplest moves. I ate it up, and it wasn't fast enough for me. He said, I'm going to teach you these moves and then call them in any order I want. And I got it right away. Star through, pass through. And he had to keep slowing down because people weren't used to it. But I'm like, go, go, Bob, go. And then I thought, and what I loved was we were all there smirking, contra dancers, modern Western, poofy skirts. Ha! I was stunned that I loved it. So then I thought, this is your next thing. You have to find modern Western. And I did. So I started with Bay Path in Boylston, Mass. with Tom Rinker. And the funny thing was, a friend of mine encouraged me. She said, you've got to do it, it's my club. And I said, but haven't they started lessons already? She said, you won't have a problem. They're only 4 weeks in, don't worry. And I thought, 4 weeks, will I get there? They see me and they say, well, little lady, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm a traditional dancer, so I know a lot of the basic moves. And the guy said, why don't you just wait and watch? Well, I was miffed. Well, I was glad I did, because I didn't know how to do a swing through, but I quickly said, oh, Allemande right, Allemande left. So then they invited me to dance, bingo, got it. And stayed with them, and I loved it. And then after I graduated in the spring, that was a 40-week course. Then I went to Tech for the summer. And that was a Tech Squares MIT. That was mind-blowing. So what I liked about Tech Squares, first of all, the caller, Ted Lizotte, was phenomenal. Once you're comfortable with the basic moves, he just has you flowing. You just keep going. So you finished a move and you keep going. You don't know what the next move is, but it makes sense, whatever he calls. That is beautiful calling to me. And your neurons are firing and you're smiling, and it's really happy. But of course, where I learned at Bay Path, they did very basic, the general modern Western square dancing. Tom did teach all position, so that you had to learn the figures from either the man's role or the boy or the girl's role. But Tech Squares takes that a whole other level, and they fractionalize things, and they do things that are supposedly illegal on the mainstream and plus list, and I love it. And when I'd go traveling off to call contra dance weekends, I would take Clark's written material of modern Western square dancing at plus level, and I would diagram it out. It was like a puzzle. And it was fabulous, because then I would learn, oh, spin chain the gears ends up here. I see the orientation. Oh, this ends up here. So that was fabulous. So then I don't know when I started, but if you're good at Tech Squares and you like the people, you just naturally get drawn into climbing the levels. So then I joined an A1 class that had 8 people and an A2 class, and then I kept going, and I went to C1, which had a class of 4. And then I organized the C2 class, and I have to tell you, my brain topped out at C2. I am a kinesthetic visual dancer. I am not spatial as far as being able to see patterns on paper or the Busby Berkeley where you can look down and you can visualize. I am not that person, which I think you have to be if you're a modern Western square dance caller. You have to be able to turn your back on the dancers and call these patterns and know where everybody is.